She's pregnant. Denise Huxtable is not pregnant. Lisa Bonet is pregnant, not Denise. So no, you can't have it. No, we're not going to do it. No.
The year was 1987. America was about to witness something revolutionary. A spin-off from The Cosby Show was preparing to break every rule about what college television could be. But what happened behind those Hillman College gates? What secrets have remained buried for nearly 4 decades? The truth is darker, more complex, and more heart-wrenching than you ever imagined. From shocking firings to secret health battles, from financial ruin to painful transformations, the real story of A Different World's cast will change everything you thought you knew. Are you ready to discover what really happened when the cameras stopped rolling? Secret 1. The Lisa Bonet exile nobody talks about. Lisa Bonet didn't just leave A Different World. She was systematically removed from the show in one of television's most controversial behind-the-scenes battles. Here's what they didn't tell you. When 19-year-old Lisa Bonet stepped onto the Hillman College set in 1987 as Denise Huxtable, she became an instant cultural phenomenon. Her eclectic style, her natural beauty, her free-spirited energy. She wasn't just playing a character. She was redefining what young black women could be on television.
You paying Jaleesa's fee?
Yeah, so she paid my student activities fee last week. I had a little cash flow problem.
But there was a problem. Bill Cosby had very specific ideas about image, control, and respectability. When Bonet posed nude for Interview magazine in 1988, the clash became inevitable. Was she expressing artistic freedom, damaging the wholesome Cosby brand? The tension exploded when Bonet married rock musician Lenny Kravitz and became pregnant. Suddenly, the free-spirited college student was having a real-life baby, and the optics were all wrong for Cosby's vision. Rumors swirled that she was difficult, unpredictable, and impossible to work with. But here's the question nobody asked at the time. Was Lisa Bonet really difficult, or was she simply refusing to be controlled? The consequences were devastating. Throughout the 1990s, Hollywood essentially blacklisted her. The roles dried up, the opportunities vanished. The woman who had lit up television screens found herself fighting just to get auditions. Industry insiders whispered that Bonet had been marked as trouble. Casting directors were told she couldn't be relied upon. Producers heard she would challenge authority. Industry built on compliance and control, challenging authority was a career death sentence. Secret 2. The real reason behind Bonet's disappearance. After her marriage to Kravitz collapsed, Bonet entered what insiders called the wilderness years. She retreated from Hollywood entirely, spending years in spiritual searching and deliberate isolation. Some claimed she was suffering from depression. Others suggested she was simply exhausted from fighting an industry that wanted to box her in. Friends from that period describe a woman who was deeply wounded by the rejection. The same industry that had celebrated her as a breakthrough star had turned its back on her the moment she stepped outside the lines they'd drawn. The emotional toll was immense. She questioned her worth, her talent, and whether she'd made a terrible mistake by choosing authenticity over career security. During this period, Bonet explored various spiritual practices, traveled extensively, and focused on raising her daughter, Zoe. She deliberately avoided the Hollywood scene, turning down interviews and staying away from premieres and industry events. It wasn't just a career break, it was a complete withdrawal from a world that had hurt her deeply. By 2005, she had been largely forgotten by mainstream Hollywood. Small roles in films like High Fidelity reminded people of her talent, but the momentum never returned. The industry had moved on, and there seemed to be no path back for someone who had once been so promising. When she eventually returned to television with appearances on shows like The Red Road, it was on her own terms. Smaller projects, independent productions, roles that interested her rather than ones that promised to resurrect her career. She had learned that Hollywood success came with strings attached, and she was no longer willing to be controlled by those strings. Now, at 57 years old in 2026, Lisa Bonet lives an intensely private life.
Lisa Bonet is one of the most private and reclusive celebrities around.
She rarely grants interviews. She avoids the spotlight. The girl who once represented freedom now chooses silence as her ultimate rebellion. What really happened to Lisa Bonet? Was it her choice to disappear, or did Hollywood push her out? The answer, as with most complex stories, is probably both. Secret 3 to 5. Jasmine Guy's Hidden Breakdown. Everyone remembers Whitley Gilbert, the pampered, sharp-tongued Southern belle who evolved into a symbol of black female empowerment. But do you know what Jasmine Guy was facing while playing that role? Guy was 25 when she first embodied Whitley in 1987, and she made that character legendary.
Bang, bang, I'm dead. First math casualty of the semester.
But the price was higher than anyone knew. Secret 3. The marriage that shattered behind closed doors. Guy's marriage collapsed during the show's height. While she was performing strength and sophistication as Whitley, her personal life was unraveling. The divorce left her emotionally devastated, and she had to hide that pain behind Whitley's confident facade every single day. Can you imagine performing joy while experiencing profound heartbreak? Can you picture delivering comedic lines about love and relationships while your own relationship is falling apart? That was Jasmine Guy's reality for months during the show's production. Cast members later revealed that there were days when Guy would arrive on set visibly shaken, then transform completely once the cameras rolled. The professionalism was remarkable, but the personal cost was enormous. She was essentially living two lives: the glamorous, confident Whitley on screen and the heartbroken, struggling Jasmine behind the scenes. Secret 4. The Alzheimer's battle nobody saw. Just as Guy was trying to rebuild her career through stage work and tours, another crisis emerged. Her mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and Guy became the primary caregiver. For years, she juggled performances with the exhausting, heartbreaking work of watching her mother slowly disappear. Alzheimer's caregiving is one of the most emotionally draining experiences a person can face. You watch someone you love gradually lose their memories, their personality, their recognition of you. And throughout it all, you have to maintain patience, compassion, and strength, even when you're falling apart inside. Guy has spoken about the moments that broke her, when her mother no longer recognized her, when simple conversations became impossible, when the woman who had raised her became like a child who needed constant care. The financial burden was staggering. Quality care for Alzheimer's patients is extraordinarily expensive, and Guy was shouldering most of that cost while trying to maintain her own career. The pressure was crushing. The financial strain was enormous, and through it all, she had to keep working because there was no safety net. There were performances she gave while running on pure adrenaline, having been up all night with her mother. There were auditions she rushed to after morning caregiving duties, trying to present herself as composed and professional when she was exhausted to her core. Secret 5. The near financial ruin. By the early 2000s, Jasmine Guy was facing something unthinkable: potential bankruptcy. Medical bills, caregiving costs, and periods of unemployment had created a perfect storm. She came dangerously close to losing everything. The math was brutal. Alzheimer's care cost thousands per month. Guy's acting work was inconsistent, with long periods between paying roles. The savings she had built during a different world's successful run were evaporating rapidly. She faced decisions no one should have to make, choosing between her mother's care and her own financial stability, between accepting roles she didn't want and maintaining some sense of artistic integrity. Roles she had once been perfect for suddenly went to younger actresses. Casting directors stopped calling. The industry that had celebrated her as Whitley had moved on without looking back. At industry events, she sometimes felt invisible, watching younger performers receive the attention and opportunities that had once been hers. The stress took a visible physical toll. She became noticeably thinner, more fragile. The exhaustion showed in her face. Friends worried about her health, her mental state, her ability to keep going. Yet she kept fighting, taking voice work, small TV roles, community theater, anything to survive. There were moments when Guy considered giving up on acting entirely, perhaps pursuing a completely different career path. But what else could she do? Acting was her life, her identity, her passion. And beyond that, she needed the income, however irregular it might be. Today, at 63, Jasmine Guy carries a fierce elegance shaped entirely by survival. She's still here, still working, but the journey cost her nearly everything. When she appears at a different world reunions or gives interviews, there's a depth to her that goes far beyond Whitley Gilbert. She's someone who has faced the worst life can throw at you and emerged, scarred but standing. Secret 6-9. Kadeem Hardison's quiet devastation. Dwayne Wayne, with his flip-up glasses, was the heart of a different world. The brilliant, charming, lovable nerd who won Whitley's heart became one of television's most beloved black male characters.
You were going out with Suzanne.
Freddie, you got it all wrong.
Maybe one day, you and I are going to feel the same way about each other at the same time.
But Kadeem Hardison's real story is one of quiet devastation and painful reinvention. Secret 6. The marriage that couldn't survive Hollywood. Hardison was 22 when he started playing Dwayne in 1987. And by the mid-1990s, he had married singer Chanté Moore in what seemed like a perfect union. Both were successful, talented, and deeply in love. But the reality was brutal. Her touring schedule conflicted with his acting demands. Career uncertainty created constant tension. Public scrutiny intensified every private disagreement. When they divorced, the emotional fallout coincided perfectly with a sharp decline in major acting opportunities. Was it coincidence? Or did his personal struggles affect his professional prospects? Hollywood has a way of sensing vulnerability, and actors going through personal crises often find their phone ringing less frequently. Hardison has spoken in rare interviews about the difficulty of that period. He felt like he was losing everything at once: his marriage, his career momentum, and his sense of identity. The man who had played confident, brilliant Dwayne Wayne suddenly felt lost and uncertain about his future. Secret 7. The roles that showed brilliance but changed nothing. Hardison proved his range in films like Vampire in Brooklyn, 1995, and the short-lived series Drive, 1997. Critics saw his talent, fans recognized his skill, but Hollywood didn't care. The momentum that A Different World had created evaporated, and no amount of good performances could bring it back. There's a particular cruelty in being talented but ignored. Hardison could see less skilled actors getting opportunities he was denied. He watched as casting directors chose performers with less experience simply because they fit whatever trend was currently popular. The frustration was immense. He took meetings where producers praised his work on A Different World, then told him they were looking for something different. He auditioned for roles that seemed perfect for him, only to lose them to actors with bigger names or better connections. The rejections accumulated, each one reinforcing the message that his moment had passed. Secret 8. The financial strain that nearly broke him. Through the 2000s, long stretches without work took their toll. Financial strain became Hardison's constant companion. The man who had been a household name was struggling to pay bills. The industry that once embraced him no longer had room for his quiet, thoughtful presence. Actors rarely discuss financial struggles publicly because it can damage their perceived value in the industry. But the reality is that most actors, even those who've been on successful shows, experience periods of serious financial difficulty. Residuals from A Different World helped, but they weren't enough to sustain a comfortable lifestyle, especially in expensive Los Angeles. Hardison had to make difficult choices. He downsized his living situation, cut back on expenses, and took jobs he once would have considered beneath him. Voice work, small guest spots, independent films that paid almost nothing. He took whatever came his way. The pride he once had in being selective about roles disappeared when rent was due. There were moments of real desperation, times when he didn't know where the next paycheck would come from, times when he questioned whether he should leave Los Angeles entirely, maybe return to New York, or try a completely different career. But acting was all he knew, all he'd ever wanted to do. Giving up felt like admitting defeat. Secret 9. The reinvention nobody expected. Rather than become bitter, Hardison transformed himself. He turned to directing, mentoring young talent, and choosing peace over fame. It wasn't an easy transition. Learning to direct required humility, accepting that he was starting over in many ways, that his fame as an actor didn't automatically translate to respect as a director. But slowly, he found a new path. He began working with young actors, teaching them techniques he'd learned, helping them navigate an industry he knew could be brutal. There was satisfaction in that, a sense of purpose that pure acting success had never quite provided. He also made a conscious decision to choose peace over the relentless pursuit of fame. He stopped chasing the big break, the comeback role that would restore his career to its different world heights. Instead, he focused on work that fulfilled him, relationships that mattered, and a life that felt authentic rather than performative. At 59 years old in 2026, he lives modestly and grounded, but the journey from Dwayne Wayne to who he is now involved.
I saw a couple of episodes. I came from doing school days in Atlanta. Yeah, they need some extra characters.
Losses most fans will never understand. Why does Hollywood discard its stars so easily? What does it say about the industry that someone as talented as Kadeem Hardison had to fight so hard just to survive? Secret 10 to 12. Darryl M. Bell's Hidden Tragedy. Ron Johnson was the smooth-talking ladies' man whose humor brought warmth to Hillman College. But Darryl M. Bell's real life was marked by tragedy, loss, and near financial collapse. Secret 10. The father's death that changed everything. Early in his rising career, Bell suffered the devastating loss of his father. The grief shook his emotional foundation completely. Just as success was arriving, tragedy stole his focus and left him searching for direction. Losing a parent is always difficult, but losing a parent when you're young and your career is just beginning creates a unique kind of pain. Bell has described feeling unmoored, like he'd lost the person who most believed in him just when he was starting to prove himself. The timing felt cruel. That loss collided with professional setbacks, stalled film opportunities, and an inability to break out beyond the sitcom mold.
Nah, you'll never see me squashed down by love again. Brother, you're missing the whole point of college.
Even projects like Homeboys in Outer Space, 1996, couldn't stabilize his momentum. That show, meant to be a breakthrough, became instead a cautionary tale about projects that look good on paper but fail in execution. The professional disappointments compounded the personal grief. Bell found himself in a dark place, questioning whether pursuing acting was worth the emotional cost. He was mourning his father while watching his career stagnate, and the combination was nearly overwhelming. Secret 11. The near bankruptcy nobody discussed. By the 2000s, mounting financial pressure became Bell's reality. Debt accumulated rapidly. At one point, he came dangerously close to bankruptcy. The man who had played a carefree character was facing a very serious adult crisis. The descent into financial trouble is often gradual, then sudden. Small debts accumulate, credit cards max out, then suddenly you're facing notices, demands, and the very real possibility of losing everything. Bell experienced all of this while trying to maintain the appearance of a successful actor.
Good, my brother, I underestimated you. People frequently do.
He stepped back from mainstream acting, relying on small gigs, voiceover work, and behind-the-scenes collaborations just to stay afloat. Some months, he wasn't sure how he'd make rent. Other times, he borrowed money from friends, promising to pay them back when things turned around. The shame of financial failure in Hollywood is particularly acute because the industry is built on appearances. Admitting you're struggling financially can cost you opportunities because producers want to work with winners, with actors who seem successful and in demand. So Bell, like many struggling actors, had to pretend everything was fine while privately panicking about money. Secret 12. The relationship that became his anchor. Through all of this, one thing remained constant: his long-term relationship with fellow actress Tempest Bledsoe. While both navigated their own career frustrations, they found stability in each other. They never married, defying Hollywood expectations, and built a partnership based on support rather than spectacle. Their relationship became Bell's emotional foundation during the worst times. When career opportunities disappeared and financial pressures mounted, Bledsoe was there, When self-doubt threatened to consume him, she reminded him of his worth. Their partnership, built on genuine connection rather than celebrity image, sustained him through years of struggle.
Mon frère and I would love to paint the town cruise with woes.
The decision not to marry was deliberate. They'd both seen too many Hollywood marriages collapse under the weight of public expectations and media scrutiny. By keeping their relationship private and unmarried, they protected it from the pressures that destroy so many celebrity couples. At 61 years old in 2026, Belle lives a low-profile life, appearing at select fan events and supporting small, creative projects. It's a modest existence built on survival rather than fame, but it's his, and he's still standing. His story raises important questions about how we define success. Is it fame and wealth, or is it finding stability, love, and purpose even when your career doesn't follow the trajectory you imagined? Secret 13 to 16. Sinbad's devastating health crisis. When Sinbad joined A Different World as Coach Walter Oakes in 1987, he brought explosive energy and comedic genius. At 31, with his booming voice and larger-than-life personality, he seemed unstoppable. And for a while, he was. The Sinbad Show, family comedies like Jingle All the Way, 1996, massive stand-up tours, success seemed guaranteed. But behind the laughter was a financial disaster waiting to happen. Secret 13. The IRS Nightmare. Sinbad's personal life began unraveling after his initial success. His marriage collapsed under the strain of constant touring, but worse was coming. Financial mismanagement and mounting tax issues with the IRS led to years of legal trouble and profound public embarrassment. The tax debt wasn't a small issue, it was in the millions. Sinbad had trusted the wrong people with his finances, and they had failed to pay his taxes for years. By the time he discovered the problem, the debt had ballooned with penalties and interest to an amount he couldn't possibly pay. He filed for bankruptcy multiple times. The man making America laugh was drowning in debt.
I'm sorry. There's some damage done, I'm sorry.
News outlets covered his financial troubles with a mixture of sympathy and schadenfreude. For someone whose public persona was built on joy and laughter, having his financial failures publicly dissected was humiliating. The IRS doesn't care about your career struggles or personal challenges. They want their money, and they'll seize assets, garnish wages, and pursue you relentlessly until they get it. Sinbad spent years trying to negotiate payment plans, settle debts, and rebuild financial stability while continuing to work and support his family. Secret 14. The failed comeback attempts. By the late 2000s, Sinbad was attempting a comeback through stand-up tours and TV appearances. He was fighting to reclaim his place in comedy. The tours were grueling, traveling constantly, performing multiple shows per week, trying to reconnect with audiences who remembered his 1990s heyday. There were signs of success. Audiences still loved him. His comedy still resonated. But the industry had changed. Younger comedians dominated. Streaming had transformed how people consumed comedy. And Sinbad's clean, family-friendly style seemed almost quaint compared to edgier contemporary acts. He was making progress, slowly rebuilding his reputation and finances. And then, in 2020, tragedy struck in the worst possible way. Secret 15. The stroke that nearly killed him. Sinbad suffered a severe ischemic stroke that left him partially paralyzed and struggling to speak and walk. The stroke triggered a long, grueling rehabilitation process filled with surgeries, painful setbacks, and months of relearning the most basic movements. The man whose voice had filled arenas could barely whisper. The comedian whose physical energy defined his act couldn't walk unassisted. Everything that made Sinbad who he was, his voice, his movement, his ability to perform, was suddenly taken from him. Stroke recovery is a brutal process. It requires intense physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. Progress is measured in tiny increments, being able to lift your arm a few inches higher, speaking a word more clearly, taking a few more steps without assistance.
Thank you to everybody who's been praying for me and saying good things.
For someone as vibrant and physical as Sinbad, the limitations were devastating. His family made the difficult decision to share his recovery journey publicly. Videos showed him struggling to form words, working to move paralyzed limbs, fighting every day to regain abilities most people take for granted. Vulnerability was stark. This wasn't the confident comedian America remembered, but a man fighting for his most basic functions. Secret 16, the survival story, still being written. At 68 years old in 2026, Sinbad continues therapy and makes rare virtual appearances. His speech has improved, though it's still labored. His mobility has increased, though he still needs assistance. The progress is real, but painfully slow. His family has been transparent about the journey, showing the painful reality of stroke recovery. They've shared the setbacks, the infections, the additional surgeries, the days when he seemed to regress rather than progress. They've also shared the victories, the first time he could stand unassisted, the first clear sentence he spoke, the first steps he took on his own. Sinbad's greatest story was never comedy. It was survival. It was fighting back when everything was taken from him. It's about refusing to give up even when recovery seems impossible, about finding hope in the smallest improvements, about redefining what success means when your old life is gone forever. How does someone rebuild when they've lost the very things that defined them? When your voice is gone, your movement is restricted, your independence is stolen, how do you find the strength to continue? Sinbad's answer seems to be one day at a time, with family support, with determination, and with the same fighting spirit that made him successful in the first place. Secret 17 to 19, Cree Summer's hidden exhaustion. When Cree Summer joined A Different World in 1988 as Freddie Brooks at just 18 years old, she became an instant cultural emblem. With her wild curls, activist spirit, and free-thinking energy, Freddie represented the bohemian soul of Hillman College. But what happened after the show reveals a different kind of struggle. Secret 17, the voice acting prison. Summer found massive success as a voice actress after A Different World, Inspector Gadget, Tiny Toon Adventures, Rugrats. Her voice became ubiquitous in animation. But that success came with relentless pressure. The fast-paced voiceover world demanded constant availability. The instability of the industry collided with her emotional vulnerabilities. And slowly, a different kind of exhaustion set in. Voice acting seems glamorous from the outside. You show up for a few hours, read some lines, and leave. But the reality is far more demanding. You're constantly auditioning, constantly competing with hundreds of other talented voice actors for the same roles.
Dude, I'm gonna hug you and squeeze you and make you go on the paper, puppy.
The work is inconsistent. You might have 3 projects one month and nothing the next. And the physical toll on your voice is real. Hours in recording booths, shouting for action sequences, creating character voices that strain your vocal cords. Summer's voice was both her greatest asset and something she had to protect constantly. Secret 18, the single mother struggle. Summer's marriage faltered under the weight of constant travel and financial unpredictability. She found herself as a single mother raising 2 daughters while trying to maintain her career. Single motherhood while pursuing an acting career is extraordinarily challenging. You're juggling auditions and recording sessions with school pickups and parent-teacher conferences. You're trying to provide stability for your children while your income fluctuates wildly. You're being both provider and caregiver with no backup. Through the 2000s, her workload intensified, but so did her personal struggles. She spoke openly about stress, creative frustration, and moments when she felt her voice, once her greatest strength, was slipping away due to overuse. Can you imagine losing the one tool that defines your career? Feeling your voice literally giving out from exhaustion? Summer experienced this terror repeatedly. There were days when her voice was hoarse, strained, barely functional. She'd have to cancel recording sessions, which meant lost income and disappointed producers. The fear was constant. What if my voice gives out permanently? What if I've damaged it beyond repair? What will I do then? Voice actors have no backup plan when their voice fails. It's their only marketable skill, and without it, they have nothing. Secret 19. The battle between art and survival. Projects like Kipo and The Age of Wonder Beasts briefly reignited her artistic spark, but the emotional cost of balancing motherhood, self-doubt, and the demands of performance never fully disappeared.
It is. I have 2 babies, so it is hard. But I will have to say, oh God.
Summer has described feeling torn constantly between being the mother her daughters needed and being the artist she wanted to be. Should she take a role that requires traveling to another city for recording sessions, leaving her daughters with caregivers? Should she turn down opportunities to be present for important school events? There's no right answer to these questions, and the guilt accompanies every choice. Take the job, and you feel guilty for not being there for your kids. Turn down the job, and you feel guilty for not providing adequately or for wasting your talent. At 55 years old in 2026, Cree Summer continues working in voice acting and music, but her life is shaped by hard-won independence, creativity, and battle-earned resilience. Her story asks an uncomfortable question. How many artists are slowly burning out while we celebrate their endless productivity? How many creative people are sacrificing their health, their relationships, and their peace of mind to give us the entertainment we consume without a second thought? Secret 20 to 22. Dawn Lewis's Age Trap. Dawn Lewis was 26 when she stepped into the role of Jaleesa Vinson in 1987. As the smart, grounded older student, she became one of the emotional anchors of a different world. But behind her poised on-screen presence was a life marked by painful turns and industry cruelty. Secret 20. The marriage that ended before it began. At the height of her early success, Lewis entered a marriage that unraveled almost immediately. It ended in divorce after just a few months, leaving her emotionally bruised, just as her career was gaining momentum. She tried to recover through stage productions and voice roles, but the industry was already shifting away from her. Secret 21. Hollywood's impossible age standards. Through the 1990s and 2000s, Lewis faced an impossible situation. Casting directors labeled her too mature for young roles, but too youthful for middle-aged characters. She was trapped in an awkward limbo that caused deep frustration and self-doubt. Even acclaimed work in films like I'm Gonna Get You Sucka, 1988, couldn't protect her from Hollywood's unforgiving age bias. Secret 22. The health issues nobody discussed. Lewis spent years fighting to sustain her income through guest appearances, teaching, and voice acting while quietly navigating stress-related health issues. The emotional toll of constantly proving her worth weighed heavily on her confidence. At 63 years old in 2026, Lewis is still active, but far more selective. She devotes time to philanthropy, music, and occasional TV roles. Her voice remains rich and steady, a reminder of the strength she's carried through every setback. Though no longer the steady Jaleesa of Hillman, she stands today as a survivor who found purpose beyond the spotlight. Secret 23 to 24. Charnell Brown's secret health battle. Charnell Brown was 22 when she joined A Different World in 1988 as Kimberly Reese, the disciplined, ambitious pre-med student. She brought grounded intensity to the cast, but after the series ended, a hidden struggle began. Secret 23. The autoimmune condition that derailed everything. Brown began a long, quiet struggle with a chronic autoimmune condition that caused unpredictable fatigue and weight fluctuations. This made it incredibly difficult to commit to demanding schedules. In an industry that demands perfection and reliability, her condition became a career liability. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, the mounting pressure took its toll. Secret 24. The roles lost to invisible illness. Losing roles because of her health left lasting emotional scars. The stress only deepened her physical struggles, creating a vicious cycle. As mainstream Hollywood opportunities faded, she shifted toward teaching and coaching young actors, a meaningful new path born from necessity. At 59 years old in 2026, Brown continues teaching, mentoring, and occasionally appearing at reunions. She embodies the strength of someone who learned to heal not just others, but herself. Her story highlights an often invisible struggle. How many performers are fighting chronic conditions while trying to maintain careers in an industry that shows no mercy for human vulnerability? Secret, 25 to 26. Glenn Turman's unbearable loss. Glenn Turman was 40 when he joined A Different World in 1987 as Colonel Bradford Taylor. With his commanding presence, dry wit, and fatherly warmth, he became the show's moral compass. But behind that steady exterior was a life marked by profound personal loss. Secret 25. The Aretha Franklin marriage. Nobody understood. Before A Different World, Turman had experienced a turbulent marriage to Aretha Franklin, a relationship filled with passion but shadowed by arguments, distance, and the pressures of superstardom. The relationship left scars that would influence how Turman approached both his career and personal life for decades. Secret 26. The child's death that changed everything. In the years after the show ended, tragedy struck when one of Turman's children died from complications during a medical emergency. This blow changed the actor forever. Though he continued working in acclaimed projects like The Wire and Cooley High, the grief lived just beneath the surface, shaping the quiet intensity he brought to every role. He took smaller roles and turned increasingly to theater and community work, choosing substance over fame. The strain of decades in the industry, long hours, constant reinvention, and the emotional scars of family tragedy took a visible toll on his health and energy. At 78 years old in 2026, Turman works only occasionally, spending most of his time with family and philanthropic projects. His journey asks a painful question. How many artists carry unbearable grief while performing strength for audiences? Secret 27. Lou Meyers' final battle. Lou Meyers was 52 when he first appeared on A Different World in 1987 as Vernon Gaines, the gruff, hilarious, big-hearted owner of the pit. Before and after his run on the show, he battled long-standing health issues tied to years of intense work, stress, and a lifestyle that quietly took its toll. He coped with the emotional pressure through heavy drinking in his early years, a habit he worked hard to overcome as he grew older. Though he found steady work in stage productions and films like How Stella Got Her Groove Back, 1998, health complications repeatedly interrupted his momentum. By the late 2000s, Meyers' condition worsened. Respiratory trouble and recurring infections made travel and long shoots difficult. The man once known for his booming voice and sharp comedic timing grew noticeably frailer. Despite this, he continued performing as long as he could, sometimes showing up to rehearsals even when breathing was a struggle. Lou Meyers passed away on February 19, 2013, at the age of 77 due to complications from pneumonia. His determination to keep working despite declining health speaks to the dedication and often the financial necessity that drives performers to continue even when their bodies are failing. Secret 28. The legacy nobody expected. Nearly 4 decades after A Different World premiered, the show's legacy remains powerful. But it's not just about the groundbreaking representation or the cultural impact. The real legacy is in the survival stories of its cast members. Lisa Bonet chose silence after being pushed out. Jasmine Guy rebuilt herself after near financial ruin. Kadeem Hardison reinvented himself when Hollywood discarded him. Darryl M found stability through partnership when his career faltered. Sinbad fought back from a devastating stroke. Cree Summer battled exhaustion while raising daughters alone. Don Lewis survived the industry's age trap. Charnell Brown transformed chronic illness into a teaching mission. Glenn Turman carried unbearable grief while performing strength. And Lou Meyers worked until his body could no longer continue. These aren't just stories about actors from a beloved show. They're stories about resilience, reinvention, and the brutal reality of entertainment industry survival. A Different World showed us what was possible: representation, excellence, cultural pride, and joy. But the journeys of its cast members show us something equally important: the cost of that excellence. They walked into Hillman College as bright young stars. They left as survivors of an industry that celebrates you one moment and discards you the next. Which transformation moved you most? Which secret shocked you? What story made you reconsider everything you thought you knew about Hollywood? Tell us in the comments below. Like this video if these revelations opened your eyes. Subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories that go beyond the headlines. Because the real story is never just what we see on screen. It's what happens when the cameras stop rolling and real life begins. The cast of A Different World gave us joy, inspiration, and representation, but they paid for it with struggles most fans never imagined. Now you know the truth. Now you know the secrets hidden for decades. What will you do with this knowledge?